I won't go on about being too much gratitude, but I will say one thing about it, because it was on my mind after a few presentations. I'm grateful to be here, and I'm grateful that you're here. And I'm mostly grateful if I had to pick one thing for happiness, to be happy. Because it seems like I'm happy a lot. Sometimes people say, why are you happy? I don't know, I just feel happy. So I'm happy to be happy without having a reason. Now, I'm going to address myself to the topic of the harvest and beyond. We've talked about the harvest. I want to talk about the harvest and beyond. I'm using that because the harvest cycle, I want to get into more of the metaphysical version of it and some of the ways that that metaphysical version of the harvest manifests, some of how that looks. Generally, when we talk about the harvest, we're talking about, if we're being literal about it, we're talking about the gathering of crops, the processing of crops, and lately we even talk about harvesting organs. That's something that the ancients didn't know about. That's called harvesting too. From a metaphysical viewpoint, Charles Fillmore from the Unity has an interesting definition of metaphysical harvest, and he refers to it as the out-picturing or the outward working of what we set in motion. What we set in motion, the conclusion of that is what he calls the metaphysical harvest. And we can almost distinguish the literal harvest from the metaphysical harvest in a couple of ways. We have a law of cause and effect that everybody knows about, sort of a scientific law of cause and effect. If I throw a rock up in the air, guess what? It's going to come down. Every reaction creates an equal and opposite reaction. On a metaphysical level, we have what's called a law of karma. It's a moral law. What goes around, comes around. So we can't do anything. We can, in the short run, do something, punch somebody in the nose, think we're going to get away with it. But trust me, it's coming back to you. You may not see it, but it's coming back to you. Now, I want to step back for a second and ask the question, where does the harvest come from? What does this whole idea come from? And it really goes back to my favorite book in the Bible, which is really Genesis. But before Genesis, let me talk about it from another perspective. And this is from the perspective of Chinese cosmology, and specifically it's the Tao. The Tao talks about it in an interesting way, and here's what it says. It says, the Tao is older than God. It's pretty amazing that something is older than God. It's almost blasphemous to us. What do you mean older than God? The Tao is older than God. The Tao created the one that we call God. Guess what the one did? The one created two. And what did two do? Two created three. And what did three do? Three created everything else. That's what it says when you open up the Tao. It's kind of interesting. If we apply it to our religion and our philosophy and our Bible, what we find is that how best to put this, it says almost the same thing, but what it does is it adds an extra day to creation. It gives us an 8-day creation, which is kind of interesting because we refer to it as 7 days creation. Why is it 8 days? Because there's a day before the first day. Why is that? It's this way. The beginning created God. Now after God got here, God created the heavens and the earth. But before God got here, we had something going on, and that was the beginning that was there that created God. So that was something happening on day 0 or the first day or something that we don't really acknowledge. But after God got here, that's when everything happened. So we could say, when it says the Tao created the one, that would be equivalent to what they say in Kabbalah, that the beginning created God. Now after God got here, God created the heavens and the earth, night and day, on the first day. On the second day, God separated the water so that there were vapors in the air, water in the air, water below. And on the third day, God created all the plants and herbs and fruits and everything else. And after that, everything else fall into place because everything was prepared for us. So it follows the same idea, but it's a slightly different way of looking at the same thing. But that's more the metaphysical version of creation. Now let me go back to the literal because I want to go back and forth as I go along. But literally when we look at the harvest, we can think of it in terms of 4 cycles. Spring, summer, fall, and winter. And we usually refer to the beginning of the harvest cycle, or many people, when they think about the beginning, they think about it as starting in spring. That's sort of natural. First there's spring, that's when things begin. Then there's summer. That's actually not the way it is. I'll explain it in a second. But before we get to the harvest, the first thing that happens is usually we have a seed, but we can't do anything with that seed until we scoop some dirt out, some level. So we scoop some dirt out and drop the seed in. That's the first thing that happens. Second thing that happens is we got to cover up that seed with a little dirt, pour some water on it. That's the second thing that happens. Third, we don't see anything. What happens? The seed breaks out of the seed form, and instead of growing up, it grows down, and then eventually it breaks through the earth. That's the third thing that happens. After it breaks through the earth, it just grows and grows and grows until harvest time, and then guess what? It starts all over again, because seeds fall again and the cycle repeats itself. I would say that really the harvest starts when the seeds fall. That's sort of the beginning. It's almost like when things are full grown. Not so much when we plant them in the ground, but when the seeds actually are there. That's sort of the beginning. The seeds are there, and that's the beginning of the cycle. The harvest is sort of the end, but the seeds dropping is sort of the beginning. So the season is shifted just a little bit in terms of what actually takes place. Now, there's Reverend Carolyn referred to the 13th chapter of Matthew as the harvest chapter, which is the harvest chapter, I think, in the New Testament, at least in the book of Matthew, because there's several stories that deal with it. There's a parable of the sowers that many people have heard about. Then after the parable of the sowers, there's the harvest of the wheat, planting of the wheat and the tares, and as she referred to it, and when you look at it, what happens is this farmer planted wheat, went to sleep, and the next day when they were looking at it, they found that tares had been planted in with it. Basically weeds and thorns had been planted in with it. And he went to the master and said, what do we do about this? Do we try to pull out? He said, no, just let them grow, because they have to grow together. Now, we can think about that as a metaphor for life, because we're surrounded by weeds all the time. We have bad neighbors, we got bad attitudes, we can't get rid of crime, no matter how many police we have, we can't put out fires, we just have to deal with it. Even right now, I was listening early in the morning, we have a thing going on with Iran. Looks like we maybe have the beginning of a nuclear agreement. However, that's only the beginning. We may never stop those folks from getting a bomb. If they want a bomb, they're going to get a bomb. But maybe we can manage it in a way that's kind of smoothed over. And no matter how many policemen we have, we can't stop crime. We just can't do it. In fact, the Tao says that a bad person is nothing more than a good person's teacher. And a good person is a bad person's teacher. And that's sort of the way it is. So when we have bad thoughts, which are like bad seeds, it's okay to have bad thoughts. There's no problem with it. Just don't dwell on them. Just let them be, let them try to pass by. Bad thoughts are like having what psychologists call a shadow. We all have a shadow. There's some part of our nature that we have a hard time dealing with, but you can't disband, you can't band it. It's just there. What you want to do is to try to acknowledge that the shadow is there, the weeds are there. That's just the way life is. And we just try to make peace with them, try to get along with them in a way that it makes life sort of okay, because certain things you can't get rid of. I know I was in a Home Depot a couple of years ago, maybe it wasn't that long ago, with my brother, and he's always kind of looking at me, he's saying, well, you're supposed to walk on water now, you're in ministry, you're supposed to do good things. And so I was in line, had a whole bunch of wood on this cart, rolled up, and they undercharged me. They didn't count all the pieces of wood I had. And I just walked out with the cart. He said, hey, you didn't pay those people for those 2 2x4s. I said, that's okay. I paid them enough money. Well, you're a minister. I said, no, this is my shadow. I'm going on. We're going to load this on the truck. I'm not going to worry about that. So you can't do everything. If you try to be a minister and walk on water and do everything perfect, it would be like trying to separate the tares from the wheat. You just have to kind of go along to get along. So all that's to say that weeds have as much right to be here as flowers do. It's just that we want to get along with weeds. In fact, if gardens didn't have any weeds, we probably wouldn't tend them as well. We would just assume they're gonna grow without our care. But because there are weeds there, we get down and we pull them out, and we wanna make sure, we fuss over them to make sure they really grow. So weeds do have a purpose. And I'm sure from the weeds perspective, it's saying, what do you think, I'm ugly? And you think I don't have a right to be here? The weeds wanna grow too. Well, that's true with criminals too, and people that don't follow the light. So God raises all of us. Anyway, so much for the weed, for the weeds. Now, the harvest there's another perspective I want to share by looking at the actual harvest itself. And this